Ellie Gordon. I am a full-time wheelchair user. I'm 35. I've got 2 kids that are both boys. So my house is pretty wild. I am creative director and brand director at sex tech company Hot Octopus, and I am co-founder and CEO of a creative production agency with Not For.
And what is the hope for With Not For?
So for with Not For, I think the hope for us at the moment, I mean, we're very creative people. Like I've got background in creative direction and business as well in my past life, being in the football industry. Emma, my co-founder, she's got a background in advertising. So we're both very creative, driven people. And so now with Not For is kind of morphed into this amazing space in creative production where we're advising ad agencies, big brands, all about representation, inclusion, and obviously providing with the talent as well. So we've got 3 kind of sectors that we've split up into this year, which is training, talent, and content. So with the training, it's called, so we go into brands and we do something called interaction training. So it's not, talking about language, don't say this, don't say that. There's like an element of it, but it's more about basically how to just talk to disabled people like people. It sounds so stupid to even say it like that. But honestly, it's kind of like just teaching by showing people how we function on a daily basis, showing people a bit of our story. So we really enjoy doing that. The talent side kind of goes without saying. We represent so many amazing, disabled, talented creatives, and also freelancers in other aspects, copywriters, social media assistants, people like that as well. And then the content, again, it comes back to like my love of creativity and storytelling. So brands commission us to make films with them, whether it's about disability or not, but bringing lots of different lived experience and diversity into the equation to make like really compelling and interesting stories. So it's really changed over the last sort of, I'd say year and a half, and we've finally got like momentum and understanding as well of who we are as a business and like what we want to achieve going forward.
And I can hear the passion when you're speaking, like it just comes, it's like radiated. What for you has been the kind of defining moment in your journey that's kind of changed your perspective on disability and how we should do more to advocate?
Oh, that's hard. I think like for me, like the catalyst as opposed to starting with Not For, and like I suppose a defining moment would be when I did work in sport. It was such a male-led, image-driven industry. So I started in sports concierge, which was essentially working with professional footballers to provide their lifestyle needs. So whether that be booking a holiday, buying a car, finding a house for them to move into, getting them into a gig, like it was all lifestyle based. It can be very it was very kind of image driven. Like I say, we were doing things like product sourcing, so finding the latest handbag or trainers, and it was very image based. So being like a girl in her early 20s when I was in that world, especially a disabled woman, it was super difficult for me because I always felt like I didn't fit the mold. I didn't fit the image of what a luxury concierge should look like. But ultimately, that drove me some amazing clients because there were clients, of course, that didn't fit that mold as well, and people that were, just people in their own way. We put stars and footballers on a pedestal sometimes, but they are just people as well. So I do think that it made for a really good relationship there. So anyway, I think feeling like I didn't fit in, feeling like, I had to be myself to pull through and to make this business work. That was one factor. And then I went into football in another way as a CEO of a football club, and that was difficult. Working with a lot of older men, have been in the industry for a long time, obviously going in as CEO of the boardroom table, and kind of feeling like, there was all these things that people were thinking, like, oh, she got here, she's only here because, she bought the shares. She's only here because Like my dad is big in football. My dad's a football agent, and he was a professional footballer as well. So it was always that link back to my dad, and that was so frustrating to me. And it's something that I've battled with internally for a long time, is doing things in my own right, making people, almost, I worry a lot. I think a lot of people worry about public perception, and that was something that plagued me for so many years. Is, oh, people just think this about me. They don't think that I've done this on my own, and that's really important to me. And now I'm just like, fuck it. Literally, like, it was such an awakening moment for me. It was like, no, I've got my company now. I'm doing it just like, just all about me and Emma, our brand. I mean, Emma's had her own experience in similar ways, working in advertising for 10 years. There's a way that things are done. There's a certain person that rises to the top. And so now me and Emma have got our own space. We're loving it. Like, we are literally, everything we do is all authentic. It's all us. We back our own opinions, and especially in disability, that can be tricky because there's so many perceptions on language that should be used, shouldn't be used. You could talk about it till you're blue in the face. You could argue about it all day. You've got disabled people that have got opposing opinions because it's all about lived experience. It's not what word is right and what word is wrong. Like, language evolves every day. So I think the fact that we've got our identity and we're able to, move forward with that identity now, it's where we're kind of seeing that success, and that happiness in our own careers as well, because we can be authentically ourselves, take it or leave it. And obviously that's a very privileged position to have, but I'm just glad that we've all got to this point in our journey where we can be like, okay, actually, this is what we want to do. These are the people we want to represent, and these are the people we want to work with, and that's simple. That's it.
I love what you're saying, and the way the idea itself, like, it's so, like, not just empowering to say, like, use disability to fill a box or to have it as a quota that you have to, like, admire to achieve. It's actually, it's embrace disability and make it part of the conversation and the elements of the organization as a whole. And I just love that. And I think something I've spoken to a lot of people about in these interviews is that social model of disability, and how it sounds like what you're trying to do is not just see disability as a problem, but see it
Yeah.
as the solution.
Realistically, yeah. And I think the thing is as well, disability is the solution to so many things. It's literally, the answer to how we get out of these boring creative ruts that we are in. We welcome not just disability but diversity as a whole. No wonder advertising has been the same for so many years. It's because the same people are making the decisions, and the same people are pitching the same ideas over and over again, and there's no new stories, there's no new faces. So to have an opportunity now to change that, and I think that's what we're both running at, is to make a real change. And I know it sounds like a big thing to make a real change in the world, but I honestly do believe now for the first time that we can do that, when it comes to representation, because we're on the way and people are ready for it now. And people need to see it. Like, how bored are we all of the same every single day? And just getting these people on with different perspectives, like I say, whether that be about disability or whatever comes through your life, and being so honest with the storytelling. I think that's what we need to really change things and to really make a difference.
When you spoke about that, I was reminded of the campaign that was launched at the time of recording this. It was a week ago, the for Down Syndrome Day.
Oh my God. It's just, like, I can't even say how good that is. Like, I literally, I just loved it. And that is the kind of thing that we are trying to do, tell these stories that are real. And like, I mean, all of it in the video should have been obvious that that person wants to go and live their life as they want to live it. And the fact we're having to spell it out is a shame. Like, in society, it's a shame. But the fact that they did it in such an amazing way, the way it was executed, and the actress, her bloody charisma, just like, I mean, I woke up, I saw it on my phone straight away because I feel like everybody was sharing it that day. Like, it was like ding, ding,
Mm.
ding, ding. But when I saw that, I was like, I smiled so much because I just thought, finally, like, people are starting to get it. And oh yeah, honestly, I don't know if there was any negative things that were said from the community about that film. Like, I didn't see any personally. If there was,
Mm.
I would love to hear, because I think, yeah, the way they smashed that story out and that actress's portrayal, oh yes, love it, love it.
For anyone who's not aware, it's a campaign video. Is it about assuming and saying like, if you assume this about me, it's going to become a reality. So just
Yeah,
assume that like she can drink a margarita, or assume that she can recite Shakespeare and stuff like this, and it's really impactful and powerful.
yeah,
One thing that I think I've learned about disability since I've always been a part of the community, but it's only the last 4 or 5 years that I've really embraced it. And
yeah.
I've been working on like creating like a social media agency to help accessibility be at the forefront of the conversation when we look at digital accessibility and social media reach. I
Mm.
met you through a conversation around relationships and
Yes.
disability. How has kind of your understanding of like disability impacted not just like romantic relationships, but the relationships that you have with other disabled people?
Oh, are we talking? What type of relationships are we talking here? Just so I can answer it correctly. Just
So
like my
let's do both of
relationships,
them.
or
So do romantic relationships first.
okay, right, okay. Well, actually, I can kind of handle both in the same. So let's go for it. This is where it gets interesting. So yeah, from a young age, like, so I've been in a wheelchair like full time since I was 11. My condition is spinal muscular atrophy, which is progressive. So with things like puberty, you're getting much taller, things like that, body changes, your condition progresses quite rapidly. So I went from walking around my very small primary school to then being in an electric wheelchair full time, because the school I was in as a high school was far too big, and for me to walk safely. And yeah, I became a full-time electric wheelchair user, which was always going to happen. Like, it wasn't anybody's fault for putting me into a bigger school. It was just my body, literally, those two things happened at once, and my body just couldn't do it safely anymore. And by the way, I tried, like, I used to try and get out my chair in classes, but it was getting to the point I was falling over and I couldn't get back up again. It was like an ongoing battle and a struggle with me at that age, like trying to understand my disability, trying to understand the progression, and then trying to understand how I kept an image in front of all my other classmates, because I was in a mainstream school. I was the only visibly disabled person in the school. And they actually had to install ramps and lifts for me to start at that school. So I think I was probably the first um, you know, student with a mobility aid that they'd ever probably had before. Um, so yeah, it was very difficult. I remember being in the school in year 7. I remember going around in my wheelchair. I'd do silly things like take my foot plates off and let my legs dangle so that people knew that my legs could move. And I just almost thought, like, why am I doing all these things? But at the time, you don't realize that you're doing them, and that it's making you look like you're trying to conform. It's making you look, quote unquote, more disabled, because you're putting yourself in the position without the things that you need. um so anyway, I had an ongoing battle with my own image, with how I felt about disability. I didn't know any other disabled people apart from my own brother, who has the same condition as me. And obviously at home and in a home environment and growing up, it was our normal. So for us, we just felt like a huge part of mainstream society, and we aren't any different. Like, but we went through that journey where we felt, quote unquote, normal. Then we were put into a big pond where we felt very abnormal. Um, and then we realized again that we were, quote unquote, normal. Um, so it was a huge journey. I promise there is a point to this. Um, so yeah, going through all of that, and obviously being a young girl, like a teenage girl, um, one of the first things I thought is sexuality and desirability are normal. And, if I can prove that I am attractive and I can have relationships with non-disabled people, then that makes me by proxy part of their world. So it's a very fucked up thing to think at a young age. But I literally, that was my driving force then. I was so interested in sex, so interested in relationships. And I'm talking like 14, 15 years of age. And for me now, as someone who has kids, like, you know, that are set nearly 7, 4, you think of them, they're so young. Obviously, family and friends have kids that are around 14, 15. You look at them now, and even with like TikTok and social media and the way they act, they're still children. So to me, looking back and thinking of me at that age, like I would be on internet chat rooms all night to men that were much older than me. I would be pursuing relationships and sex with people that probably, like, did I even want to? Like, who knows in all that mess what I was doing and why. Um, but I mean, ultimately, I wouldn't change anything. You know, it's a sexuality is still a huge part of my personality, and my, you know, my career now, which is great. So I think taking all those learnings and applying them to my career has been huge for me. Like, it's been like a full circle moment again, where I look at all perhaps mistakes that I made or things that I wish I'd known, and then try and put those out there for other people as well that might be going through similar journeys. But ultimately, I think I've always been okay in, like, in the relationship world. I've always kind of, I don't know whether it's just the type of people I go for, or like there's always that deeper connection. And I think, like, growing up, I also have realized that putting yourself out there completely, um, you know, if you're comfortable showing your disability, and taking people on that kind of journey with you has always helped for me. Like, I've always been upfront and honest about what I need, how my disability affects me in certain ways, if it does or if it doesn't. And just like letting your personality and, you know, the real you kind of shine through. Yes, disability is a part of that, but it's not, you know, it's not all encompassing. It can be, but also there's so many interesting things about you, um you know, for you to put out there and to speak to people about. And yeah, I think once I realized that, I've had more authentic relationships. I've had great friendships as well, like you said, in the community. Before, I was so closed off to the community, and I'm embarrassed to say that now. But I think everybody goes through these phases of learning who they are. And then I don't know, I've heard a lot of people say that when they were younger, they completely backed off from the community. I think one thing about that is, when you are younger and the options available to you, they're so medical. They're so, like you said about the advert, it's assume what people can do and then they will do it. But assuming that they can't do things, that's the box that they almost end up in. And whenever my mom, like, obviously, like my mom as well, having two disabled kids that are so close in age, she had no lived experience of disability, no experience of disability at all. um it really, you know, it was hard for her as well. It made her think, well, do they need to go to this club? Do they need to go to this school? It's all those questions. And she didn't have the internet, she didn't have a community. So we ended up going to all kinds of places that, you know, we get there and it would be shock. It would be massive shock because we weren't a part of the community. um and we'd go into those places, and a lot of people would have friendship groups, or they would have like a perception of what that was, but we would go in and we'd be like, we don't belong here. So it's almost like we didn't belong anywhere. So I just instantly hated that environment, and I did everything that I could to be away from it. Um, and it wasn't until I was much older, working in the space and having friends with disabilities as well, that I realized that, wow, what have I missed out on for all these years?
One thing I find really interesting when you were answering that question is that although you were talking about like relationships with friends and also romantic relationships, you've almost talked about the relationship with yourself as well, and
Yeah.
that self-love journey. And I think that is so important when we talk about disability. And I think the way you talked about it just then, like saying how when you were at school you would change yourself to be that identity that had been crafted for you through
Yeah.
that medical model approach, where like you have to change to be liked and to almost fit into the education system as well. So the fact that you've identified that and you've grown with it, it sounds like you've been on an amazing journey. And
Yeah, definitely. And I think the thing is, I never stopped adapting. Like even to my late 20s, mid 20s, I was still on the same path. And although I felt a lot more secure in myself, I was like, okay, well, I work in football, so I can be disabled, I can be a woman, but I can't be alternative because that's too many things. I have to be this straight laced version of me to still, okay, I'm comfortable with those two parts, but then I still need that extra bit to get me in there. And it's
mm,
like, why, Kelly? Why? Because you probably could have done so much more exciting work and you could have enjoyed your life so much more if you were just 100% yourself. And it
mm.
sounds like such an obvious lesson, but for me, it took me what 25 years to figure that out.
If you could go back and you could speak to your younger self, maybe when you were at school doing those things that you described, like removing the plates from your wheelchair, what would you say to yourself?
Oh, I've got the perfect answer for this one, Shandy, literally. Because the other day I was at a business convention, right, and I got a new tattoo, and my new tattoo says "fuck them all," and that's exactly how I feel about all those people that make people feel like they can't like be themselves and they can't shine. Like no matter whether that is just somebody bullying someone because they come across different to how you are, or whether it's putting down someone's business idea, or whatever it is. Do you know what? Those people are the people that are holding society back, and
Mm,
they're holding us all back in terms of our own growth, our own like perception of the world, our own enjoyment, our own happiness, our representation. And yeah, I wish I could go back and say to Kelly, like, forget these people, just keep doing you. And I would have been here a lot quicker. I would, if I'd have had no self-doubt, no inner saboteur. I like, can you imagine the journey? Like, it's taken me long enough to get here. So imagine it without any doubt or without any internal worry or external, you can't do that, you can't do this. And with good guidance, we'd be
mm.
flying forward. So yeah, I just think fuck everybody. That is my
It's
I'm sorry if
interesting.
I'm not allowed to swear on this podcast, by the way.
No, 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 go ahead. I think
uh,
it like I think what you're saying is so important. Like the few weeks ago, someone reached out to me on LinkedIn saying um about opportunities to like get involved with companies through their business, and they were like, "I'll set you up a meeting with one of our teams so you can go through stuff." And I had the session booked weeks in advance, and it came around to it. And the day before, they were like, "I've just had a look at your LinkedIn profile. I don't think you're right fit for what we're looking for." And I was like, firstly, you've wasted my time.
wow.
Secondly, like I get that they normally work with like people who are, because I think it was around like getting into board roles where like you can help steer and direct companies. And like I don't have business acumen as such, but I've got lived experience and I've got an awareness of how to make a business accessible. And
Yeah,
that's come through like what I've learned and through like my own lived experience. And it's a bit disheartening to see that the companies don't think that's important in terms of moving companies forward to a place where, like, I know we have this debate in society about being woke and stuff that frustrates me a little bit, but like it is in essence it's about being accommodating, it's about understanding people's difference and embracing that. And I think
that's
it was a
just
bit
society trying to hang on to the norm, though. That whole woke
yeah.
conversation, like, it's just society trying to hang on to what we've always done. And just people have got perspectives, let them have them perspectives regardless. What It's doing more damage holding us back in the same place that we are. Honestly, we could talk about this all day. I feel like I'm shocked as well that you had that
Mm.
interaction. Well, actually I'm not shocked because people are still like that. um but what do you know what, what I would say in that situation is, like, imagine how bad they're going to feel when you succeed and they're still in the same place, because it's going to happen. Like, you've got that drive and you've got that belief in yourself, and then those people that say you're not right, you don't fit the box, they're the people that are going to be in those roles until they die. We are always evolving, always growing, and yeah, I just apply the same logic. Fuck them.
When I started getting into like board roles, like just helping like charities grow and stuff, like I remember reading something. It was like most like trustees at this point were called like Dave or something, and they were all of a certain age. And I was there, like I got into being a trustee when I was 18, 19. I don't have the most common name and all this stuff, and I'm disabled as well. So like all of these different intersection things that like people don't think about, and like when we think about disability, like I'm always reminded of like Claire Wineland and a video that she did where she talked about like disability doesn't stop when you leave the hospital. Like it's not something that you like just have in that confined area. Like it is part of your life in all elements. Like
Yeah,
you still have bills to pay, you still have responsibilities, you still have education to go to, and stuff like that. And I think it's so like important. For you, what's the biggest challenge that we have as a community that we can all do, like that society can do more to help be allies and change the conversation?
I think it's just listen, literally listen, and don't think that you already know the answer, because there's so many people that think, I've done the research, I've done the hard work, but it's not about the research. Yes, there's an element of things that you can do there,
Mm.
but it's about understanding people as individuals and taking on board what they actually need and what they want to see from the world, and collaborating. It's not about, I read this textbook 10 years ago about disability and now that's my view and I am right, and I will tell disabled people that they are wrong because I read this book and I am right. It's not about that. It's about everything's evolving, people are evolving, people are changing. So collaborate with that person, listen, understand their experience, understand their story, and literally go forward from there. It's not complicated, but we just act like it is. And I mean, I just put my whole company out of business by saying it's not complicated. It can be complicated, and you should talk to With Not For. But if you're talking about interaction and face to face, and working and collaborating with people, literally all you need to do is listen and be respectful. And like, you might not agree, you might have different opinions, but you've got to always understand other people's side. There's no right and wrong when it comes to life. And I think that when you understand that and take a look at yourself first, then you'll have really positive interactions and positive change, hopefully.
I don't know if you saw it, but a few years ago there was the End the Awkward campaign that was done by Scope, the charity.
I was in that campaign.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, I was actually in that campaign. I mean, I did this one where it was like, in a nightclub where you do the high, like everyone wants a high five. That was my scenario, but it was how many years? Probably over 10 years ago. I had like short pink hair, pink curly hair.
Yeah, I love that campaign. They did so many videos, and I remember watching one of them, and it was like people talking about conversations they'd had and people coming up to them and making these assumptions and stuff. And they also had a video where it's like a scenario of a workplace, and they
Yeah,
were like, don't try and make it awkward by like adapting your conversation to almost like, in quotes, like make it more simple, like dumb it down. Like
yeah.
disabled people still deserve the same respect and same understanding as other people. Like
Yeah.
for,
Yeah, it's so interesting, definitely.
for you, what advice would you give to a disabled person who might be listening?
Oh, that is so hard. What advice would I give to a disabled person that might be listening? I think just based on our whole conversation, like, just it's so hard for anyone to figure out who they are. Like, literally, there's people that are still going through it every single day, trying to figure out where their place is in the world. But I think like what I would say is disabled people are the most entrepreneurial, problem-solving people. If there is no place for you in the world, then that means you need to make a place. And that means you need to, you know, make your voice heard, find your people, find, there might not even be any people, but when you start speaking up and being yourself truly, authentically, those people will come. And, you might make a space for somebody else who is less far on their journey or is more quiet or is more afraid to come forward. They'll then join you and they'll feel empowered to come forward as well. And it'll have a knock-on effect to the whole community and ultimately the whole world. Like once everybody's voice is heard and people start getting what they need and people start feeling like they can belong and make a difference and make a change, that's when we're really going to move forward. So any disabled people out there, like my inbox is always open if people want to talk to me. Like I love when people DM me on Instagram and ask me about like their kids' future and what they can do to support their kids. Or I get young teenage kids reaching out to me about relationships and sex or fears or phobias or anxieties or whatever it might be. That's my favorite thing to do because I was in that boat when I was 15, 16, 14, and I didn't know where to go. I didn't want to say anything to my parents because one, we don't have that open type relationship where you can talk about all that stuff anyway. But two, I felt like anything I sort of spoke about my disability in a negative way, it upset them. And it probably didn't. That was my perception. I am disabled, I am their child. So I didn't want to give them an extra, hate this word, but burden or guilt or sadness, because ultimately I was going to be fine. I just wanted some answers. But there is nowhere to turn. And then if there is, charities, I think some charities do absolutely fantastic work, but some of them are very much still in that medical archaic lens, and sometimes they don't have the right answers. But as people, sometimes we don't have the right answers. But I think it's about, I'm a big fan of mentoring and working with people and understanding, but I just didn't have access to that at that age, so I had to find out a lot of this stuff myself, and that can be quite traumatic at that sort of age. So yeah, I think I'd love to reach out, I'd love to connect with more people, but if I'm not the right fit, then find somebody that you really admire and go and chat to them. And I think as disabled people, we tend to be super open, especially with other disabled people. We like to share our life hacks, tips and tricks. So yeah, I'd be more than open to have any convo. But yeah, I think just try and make that space for yourself, allow yourself to learn, allow yourself to, try new things and go out and spread your message. And it doesn't have to be right. Like there's no right and wrong. It can literally be, this is me. And then you grow from that feedback and you grow from that journey. I keep saying journey today. I really hate the word journey, but it's about giving yourself the opportunities to grow, be yourself and find yourself. And it might take 20 odd years like it did for me, or it might be quite instant, but you've got to start somewhere. So I think that's my advice. Hopefully that makes sense.
What you said there about like the community helping each other, I think is like I've seen that firsthand. Like, yes, there are people who are non-disabled who still will support and stuff, but often it is when you are a disabled person and you post content or you post something, like when I started reaching out to people about the podcast, like the amount of responses that were like, this is so needed, like, and all this stuff. And like disabled people want to have a voice and want to be heard. And I think there's so many different lived experiences around disability that you're always going to be learning something new. Like the same disability can affect people so differently. And I think as far as we can go in helping promote that and working together to promote that lived experience is so valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you.
But yeah, thank you so much, Kelly, for chatting to me today.
No, thank you for having me.